Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, March 28th, 2011. We are going to start a committee of the whole meeting. If we could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. And in order to make this meeting official, I ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Gudenkopf.
Here.
Pezza.
Here.
Shea.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Rose.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Pipskin. Absent. York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Ulliner.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
13 present, 1 absent.
13 present, 1 absent. We have an official quorum. Today's committee of the whole meeting is regarding the continuation of our budget for 2011-2012. And before I actually start go into the actual budget itself, I will open it up to public forum. If there's anybody who would like to say anything in public forum tonight, please raise your hand. We didn't have a sign-in sheet, but I will allow that. We'll call on you and for you to speak. So, anybody for public forum? Oh, Flood. And naturally, we'll give you your 3 minutes and name and address, and
You got it.
thank you, Claude.
Claude Poggers, 566 West Gladys. I find this effort on determining the budget rather interesting, especially some of the things that were said at the last budget meeting. We have a police department that needs 2 people. Interesting. And they tow cars, write tickets, seem to sell the cars that people don't claim. Well, we really don't know what happens to the money of the sold cars. And then we found out when we got to the legal department that we have our own judge in town and prosecutor, and we prosecute cases. We make a profit, but we don't know what it cost. We don't know what the income is from it, but we're not losing money on it. Interesting. We had a historical society that could tell us the number of people that showed up at the Elgin show that was on that was developed by our historical society, but we can't find out the number of people that showed up at the schoolhouse, even though there's somebody being paid for 18 hours a day. In the previous meeting of the aldermen, there was a need to purchase 160 or 80 new computers, and let alone when it comes to the budget, we can't find out who goes to the historical society. We can't find out what happens to the money from cars that are not claimed from the police department. We got a judicial system, but we don't know how many cases it tries, and we don't know what the income is from it. If this budget proceeds at this rate, I doubt if we'll even know what we pay the alderman, or the mayor, or staff, because nobody knows. It's hard to believe nobody knows. Judicial system that we don't know what it costs, but it makes money.
Thank you, Claude. Anybody else for public forum at this time? Anybody? Okay, I'll officially close the public forum and go on to our budget. Before I go on to the, would you like to do the announcement? Clerk Spencer has something to announce real quick before we go on to the budget.
Before it gets too late, I have an announcement. It seems there's some campaign literature circulating with some incorrect information on early voting. So I'd like to correct that. Early voting for the April 5th, 2011 consolidated election is taking place right now through Thursday, March 31st at City Hall between the hours of 9 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. And if you want any other information on early voting locations or your polling place for April 5th, you can contact DuPage Election Commission at 630-407-5600.
Thank you, Clerk Spencer, for the update. And I'll now go on to the budget. City Manager Borchert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council has made significant progress in reviewing the budget document. We're at item U. You've been provided a roster of where we've been and what's left to be completed. We've tried to provide a recap for you of the circled items, which upon conclusion of the first review of the budget, we'll go back and, my understanding at least, the mayor will take the council back, look at those circled backed items for further consideration as you would wish as a city council. The objective of these reviews of the budget are to get to a point where there would be an authorization to the city staff to hand off the budget document in whatever status you've identified it should be handed off, then to the city attorney, for the attorney to prepare the implementation documents for the formal city council approval at a subsequent meeting. Potentially you're on target to complete that this evening, which will allow the budget then to be approved the first Monday in April. You do have the opportunity to do that at the second council meeting in April, which would be the third Monday, if need be. The budget, however, does need to be approved by this city council before the beginning of the fiscal year, which is May 1st. Several of the elected officials have asked questions. They've been received by various members of the staff. We tried to today put some paperwork together specifically to answer those questions. There's a lot of material there, a lot of information there. It's been provided at your council dais spot under a memorandum signed by the manager that identifies what some of the questions were in the categories of as an example, consultant services, a museum, questions which were generally on the finance matters, which Director Gaston answered, and some additional questions. So you've got that as a resource document to peruse as we're, as a team and as a group, going through the budget items that are left. Again, my perspective as the budget officer and representing city staff to the council and to the broader entire city community, we attempt to answer questions not only for budget meetings, but during the course of the fiscal year, questions that are raised. We try to answer those questions, certainly provide responsive replies to newspaper inquiries, provide documents for the annual audit documents, and everybody's got their perspective, got their opinion, but I believe that the city council holds the city staff highly accountable and responsible, and we try to report and answer questions. We've received governmental finance officer accounting recognition and clear approval notes from the auditors in their annual report. So I would take exception that the city council doesn't know where we're at or where we're going. I think you've asked a lot of questions and you get answers, and hold us accountable, and we try to respond. In that regard, we're now at motor fuel tax fund, pages 206 through 212. There was implemented a additional $0.015 motor fuel tax by the council to assist with the gap between needed expenditures and needed capital dollars for infrastructure with anticipated revenues, significantly closed some of those gaps. Budget has got some changes this year because of, in the past, motor fuel tax not being sufficient to pay for all of what was being charged there. And then in addition, my understanding, the state has provided a special allocation of funds to be credited to the motor fuel tax, significant dollars over a five-year period. So the numbers don't track as they would otherwise on a, not much of an adjustment from one year to the next because some of those changes that I've mentioned. There's more revenue coming in, and again, serious dollars from the state coming into the city for motor fuel tax funds.
Questions, discussion? Alderman Pez?
Thank you. Just to clarify, this is a question I had asked and did get a response to, but is that 188,000, which is that portion, is that what's reflected under 1213, the commodities line? Is that
What page?
that 188, page 207? I know that $188,000 was that every 5-year payment. Is that what that is, the commodities line?
The 188 on the revenue side is in the first line, intergovernmental. The 335 on the commodities line is for salt and is, as Alderman Pez has said, basically 2 years of the 188,000. We received one distribution this year that we're in, was not spent, will be proposed to be spent next year, and with the anticipation that we'll get the second installment of the 188,000. So the 335 is what that money's being used for.
Okay.
Any other questions, discussion? On motor fuel? Okay.
Moving forward, the enterprise fund, an enterprise fund is the parking system fund, pages 240 to, I'm sorry, the enterprise fund next is utility fund, pages 213 to 239. Mr. Hughes is here with support staff if needed, depending on the details of the questions that might be asked. Utility system is the water supply, significant dollars. Water supply is the city buys its water from the DuPage Water Commission. Water distribution is the city public works operation, and the wastewater collection, lift stations, and wastewater treatment plant are all part of the municipal utility fund, pages 213 to 239. Serious review will be done by the RJN component of the Burke RJN team, looking at the sewer collection system, also looking at the sanitary lift stations. There's other work ongoing at the wastewater treatment plant that the Public Works Committee has been evaluating, processing relative to the digester effort and other work going forward.
Questions or discussion? Alderman Mulliner.
We're currently going through a comprehensive review of the sewer side. This is kind of a question that came up this evening in the Finance Committee, so I kind of take this opportunity to ask it. As it relates to the water side, I know we replace on an annual basis a certain amount of footage of pipe. How do we determine what that footage is and, you know, where it's at? Can you give us kind of an overview of that?
Certainly. Basically, the city budgets as its average dollar amount, $770,000 a year for water main replacement, which replaces about 3,500 feet. There's 150 miles of water main, so it will be a never-ending project. But a lot of the existing water main was what's called cast iron. We now put in ductile iron, so that pipe should last a lot longer. The way we select the streets is we look at our paving program as it's coming at us, and then we look at what we call our shotgun blast map, which is where are the breaks happening. And for some reason, all of a sudden, a block will just start having them, or a series of blocks. So we put those two together to try to come up with a logical plan for the future water mains. We've pretty much eliminated all of the 4-inch in town. There's not nearly as much as there was when I started a long, long time ago. So.
Any other discussion or questions? Alderman Levin.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, on page 234, line 3089, the private property sanitary sewer, I assume this is because of the increase in people requesting overhead sewer installments in their property?
Yeah, the 3089 line sanitary sewer private property protection project, that is the overhead sewer program, which has formerly been funded at about $50,000, but this year the city council added to it significantly. Our current estimate is that we will do approximately 60 of those installations, which is why you see the $300,000 expenditure there.
60 in the current fiscal year?
Yes.
All right, and then are there pending applications that would leave people without the ability to have those systems beyond the 50,000 that's budgeted for?
We don't believe so at this point, that the 50 should hold us as we get back to more normal levels next year.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Healy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following up on Alderman Levin's question, by council action, I want to say this year we moved $450,000 into the budget, correct? So if we needed additional behind the 50, we could carry over from this year, is that correct? If needed?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Alderman Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is just a general question on the MUF fund. If you look on page 214, it's showing our total revenues proposed for 11-12 is approximately 15 million. Our expenditures are at 27.6 or 27.6 million approximate. So it seems like we're significantly spending down this fund. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing since the total balance predicted is 54 million at the bottom of the page. What is the city's philosophy on this fund and how we utilize the fund since we have such a large balance in this fund relative to maybe some of the other funds?
The Finance Committee would be our expert review committee in that regard, and they've actually been studying for the last couple of meetings the need for a rate adjustment, and part of that review involves the recommendations made by a financial administrative consultant study that talks about rate stabilization and capital, and I'll let Director Gaston go into that. Maybe the committee could help.
Certainly, Finance Committee chime in. Maybe to back up just a little bit, the Municipal Utility Fund and the parking system, as Thomas said, are enterprise funds or business-type activity funds. So they are more like, the accounting in those funds are more like a regular business, meaning that you charge depreciation. When Alderman Bram is comparing the revenues of 15 million and expenditures line of 27 million, from a cash flow, yes, but what you don't see in here, but what you see somewhat below the line, so to speak, is that 11,406,000 on the capital line.
Right.
The bulk of that is the anaerobic digester, probably 7.5 to 8 million is that. We're showing that as an expense, but it's really being financed with a low-interest loan from the Illinois EPA. So it looks a little out of balance, like we're really going 12 million into our fund balance. We are not. You have to look at the financing sources, saying that capital is being financed in another way. So our fund balance really isn't being hit as dramatically as it looks there. It is being hit. Go down to the negative 803,000. That's what's coming out. But you are correct in that. Look over the years, the last several years, probably 3, 4, 5 years, consistently the MUF has eaten into fund balance. And that's one thing the Finance Committee is looking at now as we sort of struggle with what kind of rate increases are appropriate for both the water side and the sewer side of that system.
Follow-up?
Alderman Brown.
So, and I understand that, but I guess my view on this is that we have eaten away at the balance to some degree. 08, 09 was at 58 million approximately, and now we're proposing 54 million a handful of years later. Can we or should we, and I understand there's restrictions on this fund, but can we or should we utilize, and maybe this is a policy discussion for the council, utilize this fund for additional projects or to back additional projects compared to the general fund or any other fund for that matter? And I see City Manager's Borchard's head going side to side, no.
Yeah. Ask your question again, please.
Is this fund, could this fund be utilized for absorbing some additional costs
Okay.
that otherwise are absorbed in general fund?
I think we have to think differently about the bottom line that we see here, where if we're looking at general fund and most of our other funds, we think of that as that's fund balance or somewhat equates to cash in the bank. In an enterprise fund, it does not. That bottom line that says net assets, end of year, beginning of year, really is meant to indicate if we were to sell our water system and our wastewater treatment system, somebody would pay us $57 million. We don't have $57 million, $55, $54 million in the bank to be used. These are, those dollars represent our assets. The treatment plant is probably 36 million of that 54 million. All of our water system, the water mains, the sewer mains, that's going to be another, 20 million of that. So really, right now, the municipal utility fund is not in good enough shape to be lending money out to anybody else.
Right, it needs additional funds.
It needs additional funds
Understood.
also.
Thank you.
And those are book assets versus actual liquid money.
Exactly.
Right,
That's
okay.
it.
Net of depreciation.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Okay. Very good. Anybody else? Discussion, questions?
Well, just as Marilyn was saying, we had about an hour-long discussion tonight on this very topic, and we've posed some questions to staff, and we're going to try and enhance a report to better reflect what actually transpires in this too, because there's a lot of activity that goes on in here that I don't think is very easily understood by the average layman or whatever. So we're going to try and make it more clear what this fund is used for, what the cash balances are, why they're important, and all the different elements that go into making up this fund, and determination of the water and the sewer rates too. So.
Very good. Anybody else? Okay, next.
Yeah, the enterprise fund would be the parking system fund, pages 240 through 248. Becoming more complicated as a fund as a result of the parking structures. Parking structures used to be parking lots, now they're parking decks. Much more expensive to build and to maintain than a parking lot. Revenues in, revenues out, and anticipated in the next year budget in the Central Business District, partially funded as a TIF, but partially funded by the parking fund, is the Addison mixed-use project, large parking structure on Addison. This is the operation and maintenance of all of the parking system responsibilities.
Questions, discussions? Alderman York.
Yeah, I just, perhaps city staff could explain, just for everybody's knowledge, if you look back in 2008, 2009, the uncollectibles, I'm looking at line item 0301 on page 243, it was a smaller percentage, say like 25 to 30%, and this year it's budgeted at 50% for uncollectible. What would be the reason for that creeping up over the years?
Basically, the current budget and next year's budget, the 50% is basically on how history and as far as what we're collecting and stuff. You'll see in the estimated column, we're actually writing off quite a bit that we're cleaning up our old system. So it's even less than the estimated 1011. So the 50% is basically where we're tracking.
And a follow-up?
Sure.
If we're cleaning up some from prior years, will we see some relief on this then once we kind of get some of that stuff off the books? I mean, do we need to plan on 50% every year, or?
We're hoping, but the 50% is probably conservative. So.
Okay.
Alderman Levin.
Well, my question kind of ties into Alderman York's. The uncollectible late charges also has jumped, and so I'm not sure if I'm not seeing an inconsistency where we're saying the uncollectibles go up and the late charges go up, but are we going to be collecting the late charges if we can't collect the underlying violation?
The late charges are basically the recently implemented adjudication and stuff with changed our late fee structure. So we're really just in the process of accumulating history and stuff as far as what's actually happening with that. But when we put in the adjudication, we did adjust our late fee charges and stuff that we did on a prorated basis based on notices sent.
Thank you.
So that 390 in adjudication, was that collected or was that just billed? That we originally, when we looked at the revenues on the adjudication side?
The 390 on the parking fines, that was actually ticketed. Those were the actual
Okay, so that's
fines.
money in hand. Very good. Cool. Against about 10,000 in expense with the adjudication attorney, so, or judge, I should say we have. So not a bad return on investment. Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. Page 245, line 3059, regarding off-street parking rental. I know our Public Affairs and Safety Committee briefly touched on this a few weeks ago, and with the new deck in place and the excellent job staff did reallocating a lot of the spots, I think it appears that at least one of our auxiliary leases, which is about $90-some $100 a year, we talked about could potentially be done away with. How can we or will we reflect that, or just do we make note of it, or how does that work?
Alderman Pezza, what line item are you on again? So,
Page 245, 3059, rental off-street parking.
got it. Thank you. 3059.
Basically, I know the committee has talked about that. Staff has definitely talked about it. What usually would happen is we would just keep it there, and then we would have a positive variance at the end of the year if the council and staff should agree that maybe that lease doesn't need to go forward. So, and there may be some prorated expenses. I think that one is actually property taxes. So we may have some prorated expenses even for this year. So it's one of those maybe that this year and then to figure out what happens for next year budget. So
Thank you.
Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To go along with, I actually have two questions. One to tail off of Alderman Pezza's question. How many lots or what are the rental off-street parking we're speaking of here? Is it multiple lots, one lot, size of the lot, any of those details?
The one lot I know that is on the south side of the tracks, that's a privately held parcel that the city entered into an agreement to provide all-day parking for folks that worked in the downtown, as Alderman Pezza's commented on and suggested, with the Larch Street deck and the reallocation of spaces. The need to maintain that agreement is much less and will probably be brought to the committee and council to be discontinued at some point in the very near future. And as the Addison Street deck, as that deck goes forward, there would be additional opportunities to get away from leasing spaces because the city would have its own. But currently, the need for the lease on one particular corner, the Cottage Hill and Park corner, that lease will be recommended to be, that's not really a lease, but that agreement will be recommended to be discontinued in the short term.
Thank you. My second question is in regards to the revenue section on 243. With the additional parking, I guess, even though it's slight, the first section being the charges for services, even though it's a slight decrease, I'm surprised to see a decrease at all with the additional parking alternatives within our downtown and around our train station. So is there any reason why it's going lower instead of increasing?
So on the revenue side, Mr. Trozine is closest on our revenue estimates.
We had estimated some of the new revenue in this year already and stuff, so with our reallocation of some of the parking and still trying to feel our way through some of it, as far as usage, but we did have some of the estimate already built in this year with the new deck.
Okay, so you decided not to match what we're estimated for this current fiscal year, being 681?
Yeah, I mean, just with the
Approximate.
usage and stuff, with the number of, with the unemployment rate and things like that, with people not traveling as much downtown, even in Elmhurst, losing a couple of areas, so.
Okay, I would just think that since we had the deck for the full fiscal year, we would reach the closer budgeted amount of 697,400, which was the 10-11 budget. But you're being conservative, so that's fine. Thank you.
Very good. Alderman Healy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Bram asked one of my questions. I too would have expected something, but I understand your answer. The other question I had was on expense. When we automated collection of the daily fees, I would have expected on the expense side to see some offset, some reduction in expenses, and I can't look at any one line and see where there's a reduction. Can somebody fill me in on where we might expect to see some expense reduction because of the automation? Was there none? Just in general, if you could fill me in a little on that.
Currently and prior, even with the manual honor boxes and stuff, we have 2 parking enforcement officers, and they're responsible for collection. So what's happened is just some of their duties have been reassigned so they can enforce more, that they're not picking up the revenue out of the honor boxes every day, that the new electronic boxes, we may have to empty them every once a week or every 2 weeks and stuff. So the savings in time for administering, collecting the revenue is definitely decreased, but that time has been allocated and stuff to more parking enforcement.
Alderman Healy?
Thank you.
Sure.
So then can you point to where would that additional revenue, where might that show up then? Parking fines and penalties, page 243?
Right, and we really didn't bump up because they have 10% more of their time. We didn't say they'd be writing 10% more of the tickets, but they're out there monitoring the system.
Okay, but if I'm looking at the right line, that line seems to be fairly consistent, right around 400,000.
Correct. And I don't know, police are here, I mean, they may, but again, those duties are still the 2 parking enforcement officers that are dealing with it, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Trozine, would it be fair to say that we're under promising and over-delivering as far as revenues and expenses, so that we want to be conservative on the projections on money coming in, so that if they come in low, lower than what we had in the past, we're okay?
I hope so.
Okay, so that's the presumption. And we appreciate that, because that's, I think, to kid ourselves and think there's going to be a ton of money coming in over and above. If it comes in, great, but if it doesn't, I think we're being shrewd and working it that way, so. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could we just get a quick update on the status of the Metro grant for that parking deck on First Street?
Absolutely. I can probably answer that, but I'll let City Manager Borchard. I know we're working on the lease, and the money's released from the state, and
I'm sorry, Mr.
The Metro grant.
Metro
Can we
grant.
just get an update on it?
Actually, the attorneys have locked horns, and there needs to be a meeting of the attorneys with management from Metro and management from the city to unlock the horns. But there's $2.5 million earmarked for the city of Elmhurst. We need to get the agreement done. I talked with Demetrius Skoufis's office today, asking for his assistance in arranging for the proper Metro folks and attorneys from Metro to meet with the city. Offered to go to Metro's offices, or offered a city of Elmhurst meeting to get that meeting done, with the intent to allow Mayor DeCiani to collect that check in the next month. That's our plan.
I requested I'd pick it up, Sue, so.
There's
No mailing.
It's not unusual, unfortunately, but I believe it occurs from time to time when various agencies have got part of a significant amount of dollars that they need to sign off on and pass it on, that I think there's an over-focus on language and details and specifics that goes well beyond the strategic notion of the state of Illinois assisting the city of Elmhurst through a Metro grant to build a parking structure. It was agreed to, it was approved, the dollars are provided and sitting, waiting. We just got to get the paperwork right. So we're pressing to get that done.
Anyone else? Alderman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to line item 3059 on page 245. It's something that was brought up earlier, and I certainly understand the decrease in revenue between budgeted and estimated. It's a hot button issue. I get emails about it all the time, so I want to make sure I didn't misunderstand, and I think the committee maybe has a better understanding of how it, of where things lay. But Mr. Borchert, you mentioned something about the Adelaide parking deck and shifting around some allocations there, and I know that there's a lot of people interested in that. I don't want to gloss over that, and I didn't understand. I think Paula Pezza was, or I'm sorry, a member of the committee was speaking from what they know has been in front of their committee. So I'll just ask for clarification either from the chair or from Mr. Borchert as to the current status of Adelaide and if and when any changes will happen on the allocation.
This is just on allocation of levels and...
My understanding is that it's being evaluated, it's being studied. There needs to be a chance for the large lot, the large deck to be utilized in its maximum opportunity and to create a new normal. There are other spaces that have been set aside for passes that, from an analysis perspective, it doesn't appear as that all of the supply or all of the folks that are users of the system have found some of these locations. So we need to continue to inform and educate the users of the parking system as to the opportunities in that parking system. Make sure that's been established before there's any changes made. But certainly, if after there's an appropriate time for the community to understand the opportunities of the system, if there's spaces that aren't being used that are critical spots, we will recommend to the committee to council to reallocate those spaces so that they are used. But our experience has been that you need to make slow moves, not fast moves, because it takes a while for all of the folks that use the system to understand where there are opportunities and understand how the other users of the system use the system. I don't know if I've helped much. Adelaide, we know there's some spaces that were targeted to be used by employees of the downtown, and they're not all being used. There's other moving parts. A business moved away that had a lot of employees that use those spaces. So what's going to backfill that empty tenant space? Is it going to be a business that's going to have a lot of employees that would want to use those spaces? yes or no, they're empty spaces. So that's another reason why moves need to be made slowly and on a design basis, and also focus on the other items that are moving in the downtown area that affect the system.
Alderman Worley?
Okay, so I think I understand. To summarize, certainly we're looking at it and looking at allocation, but there is no revenue up or down in this budget that indicates a pending change that's on the table.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Very good. And it looks like the large deck is being used quite often, because I drive by it, and it's pretty much full, so it's a good thing. And I think people are getting used to it, and it's all good. You build it and they come, right? Anybody else? Questions, discussion? Next.
The various capital projects funds are in a series of funds between 249 and 295. These are the source categories of a lot of capital projects. All the TIF 1, TIF 2, TIF 3 are here. Bond budgets and a anticipated bond sale to finance the mentioned before, that Addison deck mixed-use project that is mostly a parking structure is identified as a public facilities construction fund on page 291.
Questions, discussion? Alderman Peasant.
Thank you, Mayor. Page 251, and I had started a bit of a conversation with Marilyn Gaston earlier, and we got halfway through this, so I just wanted to follow up. Regarding the payment, oh gosh, where is it? It was of $1 million toward paying down principal on page 255, line 9085. I think that's an excellent use, obviously, to pay off a good portion of a loan, to save ourselves, obviously, a lot of interest. But my question is, when you look at the rest of the big picture, there's a $2.1 million also in the fund that is there potentially to purchase a property in the TIF. And I'm wondering if, I guess I'm thinking of it as if I were doing this on a personal level, since the money is there and we still have, after we pay off the $1 million, $1.9 million left on that line of credit to pay down, could we use the 2.1 to just pay down and pay off the whole thing, save that interest, keep the line open, and when that property becomes available and the clock ticks for us to get the money, we then get the money at that time to have some type of savings? Interest-wise, is that something feasible, or how would that work?
I think I understand the notion of how to best use the city's money in the bank. That is an alternative that would be possible and would be looked at. Maryland is nodding in an affirmative fashion, so that might be a possibility. Again, the budget provides for the opportunity for the city council to take these actions, but if there's a better way to approach it based on the conditions that are current at that time, and timing is an issue, the availability of that 2.1 purchase, is it really going to be 2.1, or will the appraisal of the value show that it would be less? What's the timing of it? And the timing of the payout of the other areas, all are something that really the finance staff and finance committee, eventually then the city council will be asked to approve based on some analysis prior to that decision being made. It's a good observation.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Discussion, questions? Next. The trust and agency funds, 304, 318, these are
funds that the city needs to maintain records of, books of, track, be audited on. Did I skip one?
Question, are we skipping over
Debt service.
all the other TIF
I'm sorry.
funds?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to skip debt service funds. 296 to 303.
96.
Were you asking about the other TIFs?
Yeah, were you still open to other questions on the TIF funds, or do we move beyond that?
Well, we can go back if you got questions.
I'm sorry, I hate to pull us back. I
Not
know
at
we're making- I just, on TIF 2, I couldn't understand the use of the $1 million capital outlay and what that fund would be used, what that improvement is. I see there's, okay, infrastructure and land improvements, but it'd be 261 is the explanation, but I just wanted to get a little bit.
261.
This is a potential project, an anticipated project. It would provide for that expenditure should there be a private side investor, developer that needed these environmental cleanups to be implemented. This provides for that expenditure to be applied there out of the TIF increment. If there is not a developer that's expressing interest at this time, there is not a project that's identified at this time, but should there be, and we would hope there would be, this would be where we would go to find the financing to finance the project and then have that project paid off with the TIF increment that would result.
Thank you, Mayor.
We do have a vacant building in that TIF district that has some
A number of
contamination
opportunities,
issues.
yes.
Exactly, okay, very good. Any other discussion or questions on TIF 2? TIF 3? 83 in St. Charles, any questions?
Just as an aside, relative to the city's economic development interests and evaluations, the Economic Development Commission is looking at potential areas going forward. The city has, within the manager's authority, hired Kane and McKenna to assist the city staff in looking at options and alternatives. Their report will certainly be made available to the full city council once it's available relative to strategic opportunities, relative to economic initiatives going forward, potentially using TIF as a tool, and potentially using other development tools. More to hear on that in the coming year.
We'll be all ears. So we got a lot of opportunities, I think, to grow the tax base for our schools, and I think we're going to need several tools to make that happen. So TIF is definitely going to be one of those. So, Alderman Morley.
Can we get thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd ask Ms. Gaston just for a quick recap on how much time's left in each TIF. Ballpark, I'm not asking for specifics.
Okay, good.
How many years,
On
approximately?
TIF 1, 12 years. TIF 2 started in 94, so we're looking at, I think, 2017. And TIF 3 was started in 96, so you're looking at 2019, 2020, something along that line.
It's pretty good for off the cuff.
It's pretty clear our projections are that TIF 3, 83 St. Charles, will finish financing the acquisition expenses anticipated for the replacement of the garage site. That's the last remaining expenditure. TIF 2, however, will not be complete, and city staff is looking aggressively, and now we'll use the Kane McKenna team to evaluate the best opportunity to handle, to allow the rest of that TIF that won't be done, we don't anticipate, by the end of the TIF. So should it be extended, or there's a application in the TIF statute that allows one to de-TIF part of the TIF and re-TIF the other part of the TIF. We're looking at that concept to get a good staff understanding of the pros and cons. With that complete, we bring it to the DPZ committee and the city council for your consideration.
Very good. Either option would give a release of all of the redeveloped parcels to the school district and the park district. So either option is a good thing.
Yep,
Win-win.
Mayor would be correct. If the TIF were to be extended, like TIF 1 was extended, it would be extended with an understanding of a release of part of the development of the TIF, providing revenues to the other taxing districts. If the other concept was used of a DTIF and a RETIF, again, the area that would be DTIF would be released from the TIF, which would create new growth for all of the taxing districts, and then what's not been improved upon would be what is RETIFed, if you will.
Very good. Alderman Morley.
Just to clarify on TIF 3, it's on schedule. It's not it's on schedule to pay back its obligation within its time frame, but not release early?
Correct. It's actually making the increment is paid expenses and creating a surplus, but there's an anticipation of, as Alderman Levin identified, this $1 million. It would be at least $1 million to do some of the environmental fix-ups and cleanups and roadway improvements to the east half of that area that is north of Lake Street.
I was talking about TIF 3.
He was mentioning TIF 3,
Sorry,
not TIF 2.
TIF 3 is on target.
Okay.
The other thing nice about TIF 3, just so the TIF 3's got that CPI built into the TIF, so it's constantly pumping money at a CPI level, and then once the TIF is expired, then the entire increment goes back to the taxing bodies, correct?
The self-imposed by the city council way back did provide for a CPI growth of the base, but because of the recent downturns in EAV, for the first time ever that surplus may not be possible in the anticipated next fiscal year.
Okay. Just because of an EAV drop, but in
Correct.
the past, it's always been typically, releasing. Well, we'll get these EAVs back up too, so. Anybody else? Discussion, questions? Very good.
So now on to the trust and agency funds, 304 to 318. These are again funds which the city.
Debt service?
I did it again.
You want to talk about your debt?
Call you Skip.
Debt service funds, 296, 303. Did we do those? We were just on those. We went back. Okay, so we were there. We went back. Now we're
296.
back. The debt service funds, 296 to 303. It's really just the bookkeeping for bond issues that have been approved before. Now on to the trust and agency funds. These are funds which the city has an oversight responsibility on, city council has oversight responsibility, as they are funds of the city, but they're really relative to they're being managed by the pension funds on police and fire. Lesser dollars are the Gloss Mausoleum Fund, and then the Working Cash Fund, which you have as a committee, finance and then city council authorized an action plan to pay back what you have accessed according to your policy. So we're anticipating a payment at the end of this fiscal year, and then payments over the next 2 fiscal years back to the Working Cash Fund, following your policy, which you approved at the last council meeting.
Alderman York.
Yeah, I have a question. On page 304, which is the kind of the description page, the last sentence says, resources are contributed by employees at rates fixed by law and by the city at amounts determined by an annual actuarial study. Obviously, we see that in the Finance Committee, so I'm familiar with that, but I think kind of given the overall temperature on pension funds and whatnot, do we expect that there will be any material changes to the future results of those actuarial studies? In other words, you hear City of Chicago saying we're going to have to increase property taxes 40% in the next 10 years to meet obligations. What, if any, forecast do you guys as city staff have, or what might we expect?
My understanding, none of the worst-case scenarios that you read about in the paper, which are worst-case scenarios, apply to Elmhurst. The city councils of the past and this city council has paid annually the actuarial recommendations or the state's recommendation, one or the other. Typically, Elmhurst does the actuarial study. Typically, then the city council funds that. The appropriate employees are paying their fair share, and the percentage that is anticipated to be, suggested to be at the funding level, Elmhurst is pretty close to those recommended levels.
As a follow-up, I certainly...
Which provides for a reasonably steady set-aside of dollars to fund these obligations, as opposed to a spike that would cause real budgetary difficulty for the community at that time.
And perhaps I should have framed my question a little bit, but I understand that we're doing a very good job of funding these things, but do we see where the actuarial people might say we need to step it up a little bit, or anything we see coming down the pike there? Okay.
Some of the recent changes that the General Assembly approved actually could reduce our actual contribution as far as an employer with the property tax. They actually spread out the amortization period, they lengthened that, and they also went from 100% funding to 90% funding. So those two changes could actually reduce it. We've had some preliminary discussions with our actuary as far as we really need to talk about that and then bring something back to the Finance Committee and the City Council as far as what effect that'll have, and is there other things that we may want to look at as far as some of our assumptions that we use in the study as far as interest earnings, salary increases, things like that.
Very good. Any other questions or discussion? Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this just kind of popped up based on Alderman York's question. So the doomsday scenarios that we hear coming out of the city of Chicago, is it then a safe assumption that they are potentially under the gun because their pensions are are not as funded as well as ours are, and that if to be forced into compliance with state statute, they may be forced to do dramatic things to their property tax rate, where Elmhurst we wouldn't, because our pensions are funded pretty much where they need to be? That's a correct assumption? Thank you.
Good. Any other discussion on pensions? All right. Next.
If there's no other questions, then trust and agency funds and above were I think for general questions or to review circled items. Notes going back, Director Gaston provided a summary. We double-checked that with our city staff. We think that list of circled items was complete, accurate. If you want to go to that, the first item numerically that was circled were salaries and wages, full-time. I think it was a general discussion there, and then specifically, what about the assistant city manager position? And in that regard, would report that been discussions about staffing the assistant city manager. Currently, there is a city manager in the process of doing succession planning and handoffs, and we're working with the city staff and the city council in that transition. Assistant manager / fire chief cop serves as position in that regard, mostly financed by the fire side, partially financed by the assistant manager side. This budget before you would provide that there'll be a standalone city manager and a standalone assistant city manager, and then subsequently a standalone fire chief, police chief, other department heads. It would be my suggestion that budget as presented be accepted but not implemented until you would first find the replacement city manager, that replacement city manager to come to the community, to work with the community, work with the mayor and the city council, and then review the operational situation, review the budget, and make a recommendation to you as to the funding and the filling of that assistant city manager spot. The advertisement prepared by your marketing agent and consultant, Heidi Voorhees, clearly showed on the advertisement to the world of potential city managers the organizational chart that is also on page 2 of the budget document, which provides for an assistant city manager. That is a typical arrangement for a community of 25 to 30,000, and certainly of a community of 45,000. That also has its own fire department and its own wastewater treatment plant, both of which many communities don't have. So those are my comments in that regard relative to at least the assistant manager portion. We've managed to provide a budget clearly designed to be able to afford an assistant city manager, to allow that management oversight and reporting to the community and reporting to you as a mayor and city council, but providing that division of responsibilities across the organizational chart to provide for the best, in my opinion, best potential probability of success going forward for the management team and the mayor and the city council. And again, it would not be implemented without those steps going forward, and without clearly the knowledge and approval of you all, because you would be approving both the manager and the assistant manager. The municipal code provides that the other department heads, the police chief and the fire chief, are appointed by the city manager, but with the approval of the city council. So there is embedded in the wisdom of our founding fathers of the Elmhurst community some serious levels of checks and balances going forward. But the city council is always one of the checks or one of the balances.
On the leader.
If I understand you, Mr. Borchard, you are saying that if this money, which is contingency money, or is this simply saying that this money is here and that it will be spent at some point for an assistant city manager? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the budget is provided. You've got a balanced budget, balanced meaning that there's revenues anticipated and expenditures that are estimated. Expenditures are more of offensive spending. The revenues are estimated. Mayor DeCiani mentioned to Assistant Finance Director Trozine, on your revenues, are you underestimating and overachieving, hopefully? And that's the conservative approach that has served Elmhurst well and been our standard. The last 2 years, even the conservative numbers didn't come out as well as one would like, and we actually had revenues underperform, an unusual situation. They seem to be coming back. Looking at those revenue estimates, they seem to be seem to be still solid, although I would say that the state of Illinois has suggested new parameters for the local governmental distribution fund relative to income tax. They're suggesting that some of the earlier numbers, although dismal, may not be achieved and may be too high. Mr. Trozine has looked at that versus the Elmhurst numbers, and we think we're still all right. Don't need to change them. But to your question, Alderman Leader, the budget anticipates the financing of an assistant city manager, the financing of a city manager, financing meaning you're paying that out, and there's other revenues coming in that pay for other labor, other commodities, everything that's in the budget, capital in the budget, making a $190,000 payment to the working cash fund and anticipating $1.5 million contribution to the general fund. So the budget's been prepared with the suggestion that the city can afford that staffing.
Follow up, please.
Alderman Leader.
What if the city council, in its wisdom, does not give consent and says, we don't want to hire an assistant city manager? What happens?
Well, the city manager that would be here, I would think, would say, we'll do the best job we can. We'll do the best job we can, and the work would need to be, the work will need to be done. How's it best done? My budget officer recommendation is that this would be the time to take that look at a more traditional organization chart and finance it if possible. I think the financing is possible. It's in the book. Is this the right time? Sometimes good ideas need proper timing, good timing. Maybe it's not exactly the right time, but I think the budget should provide for it to be when you all, as a city council, decide it's the right time.
Alderman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this, would this be a full-time job, or is this just a one-year transitional job, or is this a permanent full-time replacement?
It's proposed in the budget as a standing assignment and projected out full-time beyond that. If it's not authorized, it's not funded, then whatever that salary would be, it wouldn't be spent. It would be a contribution to fund balance, or it could be redirected to staffing levels of other areas to get the job done. But it's budgeted for 11-12 and then 12-13 as staffed and as funded and as approved. Again, like anything else, if it were to be dark or kept dark, those dollars are still in the budget but aren't spent. That then helps contribute to a fund balance at the end of the year.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't a 1 or 2 year position to help with the new city manager in transition. And the other question I had, you touched on it earlier. I'm not sure if I understood the response. I'm not sure where our code falls on this. Just hypothetically, let's say that this is approved in the budget. Whose responsibility is it to hire? And my specific question is, let's just say we approve $175,000 or whatever it is for this position. Would it be at the sole discretion of the new city manager to hire this person?
No, the Elmhurst Municipal Code provides for three positions that the city manager needs specific approval from the city council on a appointment that otherwise would be the manager's appointment. The manager appoints by MCO, assistant manager, if there is one, police chief and fire chief, but the city council needs to approve those three. So in this case, the first step would be the city council authorizing the then city manager to proceed with the development of the details associated with the job description and the pay scale to get that approved, and then to begin the process of identifying candidates. The manager's recommendation for the candidate would need to be approved by the city council, as you've recently done as a council for police chief and fire chief.
Thank you. Thank you. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 3 points, and none of the 3 points should be construed as against the Assistant City Manager position. I think a lot more discussion would need to happen amongst the council with staff's input before we as a council decided whether we wanted to hire an Assistant City Manager or not. So I'm leaving that open. But in terms of budgeting for an Assistant City Manager, I look at it practically. As City Manager Borcher said, clearly we wouldn't hire this person until the new city manager is on board. And that literally could, that in and itself might be months away, is months away, really. And then once that person's on board, that person, I would think, is going to need months, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, to decide whether an assistant city manager was needed, and if an assistant city manager was needed, what would that person's duties be? I think that's vital to knowing if we need the assistant city manager or not. So when you start to timeline this thing out, should we put this in the 11-12 budget when it may never be in the 11-12 budget? So for that reason alone, I'm against including it in the 11-12 budget. Okay, but what if I'm wrong, or what if some of my assumptions are wrong, and the council in conjunction with the new city manager says, no, we really need the assistant city manager job, and here's what we'd like that person to do. I look back at when Fire Chief Kopp was promoted to assistant city manager, that position was not in the budget at the time. By council action, we created, well, not created that, but we filled that position, we funded that position, and we're able to do that without it being in the budget. We made it happen. So I would think that if that same situation were to occur and we wanted a full-time assistant city manager in the 11-12 fiscal year, we could make it happen without being in the budget. So I think whether it is the position is filled in the budget year or not, or whether it's not, I don't see the need to put it in the budget at this point. So I would be not for including it in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Brown.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on Alderman Healy's comments. I think that this has been debated, at least within my tenure, 2 to 4 years, on and off. Does the city of Elmhurst need an assistant city manager or not? I don't think we're any closer to that decision-making here tonight at all. And quite honestly, until this showed up in the budget document, we haven't brought that discussion up to the table for at least 2, if not 4 years. I concur with Alderman Healy on this exactly. I think the monies would still be there if we don't reallocate it within our budget. So therefore, I would recommend that we do not allocate the monies for the assistant city manager position until we have time to actually vet this and do our due diligence on it. I think we're doing a great job. The city staff is doing a great job under the current paradigm with Fire Chief Kopp playing a dual role, taking on 2 hats, assistant city manager as well as fire chief. And I see that going forward at least until we're able to get a new city manager on board and vet this as a council.
Alderman Shea.
Yeah, I agree with Alderman Healy and Alderman Brown, because just because we do have that money doesn't mean we have to spend it. I think we should postpone it, allocate it to a different year after everybody has, after the new city managers come in. We have exceptional candidates that are very, very qualified, and I would like to see how they work it out.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Alderman Rose?
Well, I would respectfully disagree with 3 of my esteemed colleagues for several reasons. One, a budget document is a planning document. I don't necessarily think the analogy of we found the money for the current structure because it was a very small amount of money that we need in order to have a dual fire chief and assistant city manager. It was a very, very small amount of money. So I think looking for $6,000 to $10,000 in a budget is a whole lot different than looking for $150,000. So it's not so easily found. Second, are we doing fine like we are? Maybe we are. I think that it's very short term. I think people can do a lot of stuff short term. I think the fire department is stretched. I think that Assistant City Manager Kopp is wearing two hats. I think it's to his really to his great credit that he's able to do that, but over time, that's not sustainable. I don't know that I think that is sustainable for a community to not have full-time fire chief. I'm not convinced that that's a sustainable model for us to do. And my third reason why I would urge us to keep it in the budget is because money's not so easily found. Let me say that again. And if we don't put it in there, I think we really tie the hands of the future city council that will be here in May. Don't know who that council is going to be, don't know what they're going to think. I think that I want to say again, we are not approving an assistant city manager. I agree with Alderman Bram. We've talked about it and talked about it. We have never referred it to committee where it really gets decided upon. But if we don't have that money planned for in the budget, it's not so easy to say, well, let's refer that to a city council committee, and yeah, we think it's a great idea. Where is the money? We don't have the money at that point. So I think, in essence, if we pull it out, we are saying for at least a year, we don't want an assistant city manager. If you are prepared to say that tonight, we don't want an assistant city manager for the next year, then I suppose you vote to pull it out. If you want to keep that option open so that the appropriate city council committee can look at it, we all can decide upon that at some point when we don't have election fever upon us, and I feel qualified to say that myself right now, that when we don't have that, I think we'll make a better decision. And so I would urge again to say, we're not approving an assistant city manager. We are just putting it in so we don't hamstring, don't tie the hands of the next city council and the next city manager, who may look at this and say, maybe that's what we should do. I think we get lulled into a false sense of, gee, isn't it great, everything's fine, because we've had a city manager here for 20 years who knows the ropes, knows what they're doing. Not to say the new city manager isn't going to do that, but I think that people stretch themselves out, and I suspect the current city manager is stretching himself out. The most important statement I think he's made is the work's going to have to be done. So we're going to either pay for an assistant city manager, or we're going to take that money and we're going to spread it out for other kinds of personnel to make that happen. So I would urge us to not pull this out of the budget.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to concur once again with Alderman Rose. Well said. You know, there are certain. I think the budget review has been, the process has gone fairly well. There's been questions and answers and checks and balances, and I think it's been appropriate when asked. But somehow we get off, it seems to be sometimes, maybe just human nature, to be looking at the budget as it's a checking account. We're not balancing a checkbook here. It was said early on that this is a fence, and I'd much rather have the fence intact when the time needs to, when that money needs to be called upon. I'd much rather have it there than have to have a scramble and try to find $150,000, 6 or 7 months from now. I think we need to think of this budget as a fence, and I think it's a good budget. I think it's appropriate for the city, but I concur with Alderman Rose that I'd much rather have the money in there and not spend it, as opposed to needing it 6 or 7 months from now, trying to figure out how do we get it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. Several notes. I completely agree with Alderman Healy's line of thinking, and I think more concerning is to me, it's basically telling the community that we already know going into this, that whoever it is we hire won't be able to handle their job. That's how I look at it. That's tons of phone calls and emails I've received about this. How do we hire a consultant or a headhunter and expect people to respect what we're doing, which I think we're taking our time. We're really trying to do a good job with this hiring process. And in the same breath say, we already know that person isn't going to be able to do this job. I don't think that's fair to the people we're going to be interviewing. I don't think it's fair to the community. I think it's just sending the wrong message, presuming that we're going to need this, and this person we hire is not going to be able to handle the city on their own without an assistant. May they appreciate a transitional part-time assistant? Perhaps, and I think that is something doable and feasible and would make sense, but to automatically say we're going to put in almost the same salary for an assistant, which I also wonder if the manager would have a problem with that. The salary is so close to what the the city manager would be getting. I don't know if that's sending a bad message to the potential candidate either. I think this is just sending a mixed message, and I'm not a fan of the message it's sending. I do think a transitional part-time could make sense, or does make sense. I just don't like the message it sends. And then a quick question. What exactly in that line item would we be approving toward this position? That's something I'm not 100% clear on. This 397.2 and then the 4029 on page 105. What is exactly the detailed amount, or how is that supposed to work in that figure?
Just to clarify, your question, you're on page 105,
Right?
the very first line.
Yes.
So of the 397, you're asking how much of that number would be the assistant city manager?
I thought that's where I noted that was coming into.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is. I think we've said before, many of the managers, the city manager, probably almost all of the directors are allocated in various spots. We have in this number 60% of an assistant city manager in that number. And that is about 90,000. And I would caution, I heard Alderman Pezza say the word approve. You're approving the budget, you're not approving that expenditure. So if this budget is passed tonight with this in it, you did not approve an assistant city manager, you approved the opportunity to have that.
So where would the rest be?
In the MUF fund, and 10% in the planning and zoning department, and is that it? Just those three. So 30% in MUF, 60% in the administration budget, and 10% in the planning and development budget.
Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. This is budgeted for a full year, this position?
Yes.
All right, so if someone was hired in September, October, November, it would not be using a full year's budget.
Correct.
I have mixed feelings on this. On one hand, I do note there is an assistant city manager position that's provided for in the ordinance, so it's not as if we're creating a position that's never been there. And an assistant city manager is also something that is, I would say, common in cities of our size. And as I mentioned once before, some cities have an assistant city manager and some also have an assistant to the city manager. So I do recognize we've been efficient, I'll say, over the years. I also balance that by the fact that if we look at our general fund, we're about $3 million short of where we'd like to carry that. So I don't think we have a whole lot of money that we should be going out and looking for ways to spend it. And I think it's an extremely important point is that, as the current city manager has pointed out, that by approving the money, it doesn't mean that anyone can go out and hire without coming back to this council. And when I asked a question about police officers, the two that were budgeted, the answer was different. It was, well, that's in the budget, so unless someone sounded some sort of alarm, that they could be hired. But in this case, there's an opportunity for a very full discussion before that decision would be made. It's also would be within the discretion of this council to decide that the budgeted position is too rich and there are talented people who I expect would be around at lesser amounts, and it could also be that there's an assistant to the city manager as opposed to a city manager. So there are different kinds of options. And I think it's something that maybe the Finance and Council Affairs Committee might look into a little bit more full, but I'm mindful that Alderman Rose has told me that this is not something new. So that's all kind of a prelude to my thinking is I could support putting it into the budget at some amount, but in no way am I saying that I would agree that a assistant city manager should be hired. I don't think that by doing that, we're saying to any city manager who's going to be hired that they're incompetent, when I would guess that many of them are coming from communities where they have the assistant city manager. I'm not trying to spend our money, and I'm not saying I would agree to it, but I would support to put it in a budget and let the city council talk about it. If we were to vote on it tonight, I probably would be disinclined to support it right now, but I'm new to the council, and I think the funding opportunity needs to be there, and if we don't spend it, that's money to increase our general fund.
Thank you, Alderman. Anybody else? Alderman Gutenkopf?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This conversation reminds me of a conversation that we had, I think it was 2 budget cycles ago, where we started to talk about programs that we were eliminating from the budget, and at the same time we were proposing to add new programs. And at the time, I really couldn't support that. What I've read about sort of government ethics led me to feel that it's inappropriate to leave programs unfunded and try to add new programs at the same time. It's just not something that made sense to me, that if you're not going to fund a program because your budget's short, you don't then go add some new stuff in the budget. And I'm kind of feeling that way about the assistant city manager position, because we have staffing positions that we've cut and not added back in. And I'm reminded of the discussions that we had as a council when we first proposed the addition of an assistant city manager position, that we were looking for a transitional position that would help us bridge between a city manager who had been with us for a long time, really knew how the city operated, so ingrained in what we did, that it was going to take us a while to get a new person up to speed. And wouldn't it be very helpful if we had a staffer whose responsibilities encompassed bringing a new city manager on board and getting that person really, into the job? And so as a council, I think we heard that argument and said, that sounds really fair, and we probably ought to look at a transitional position, which went from acting city manager, then acting assistant city manager, to assistant city manager, because we hired someone who did a very good job. I'm a little concerned that we're continuing this trend of moving into a position that we have not really fully vetted. And while I recognize that there is great value in identifying a funding source, it does seem to me to presume that this position will go ahead and be added into the budget. And on the grounds of we have left dark several city positions that we're struggling to fund, I'm not sure that I can support adding another full-time position under those circumstances. And so while I appreciate Alderman Levin and Alderman Rose's comments about how without the structure we can't add the position, I think there are other positions that we have left open that I would prefer to see us add back in first before we add a new full-time staff position. So I'm not sure I can support this funding in this budget.
Alderman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, this is an interesting budget for me. I think it's the fourth one. It's the first one where I've seen our revenues going up. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. The biggest reason is that we asked the citizens of Elmhurst to dig deep and help us out. And we certainly appreciate that. The second thing is that our sales revenue is actually turning around. But I'm a little concerned that our first year of turning the corner, we're immediately trying to allocate those funds. Roughly, a ballpark of our operating budget, roughly 59% of our budget, give or take, is benefits and wages. It's by far our biggest expense. And along with those benefits and wages are certain expenditures that we can't control. I'll remind everybody, just about 2 months ago, we faced a health insurance increase of $340,000, give or take a couple $1,000. So I wouldn't say this is an ethical concern of me. It's more of a, I guess, philosophical, is that I think we have to take a real close look before we add a person to the payroll. And we're not talking about, I mean, in this case, we're talking about someone who's making $150,000 plus benefits plus pension permanently. And it's just not something I'm prepared to do. There's been some conversations about, well, you know, just because it's in the budget doesn't mean you're going to spend it. Well, anybody who's been on committee knows that one of the first questions on committee is, well, is it in the budget? It's the first step. A couple of the other aldermen pointed out, rightly so, that in times, recently this council, in the last year, when we had to approve an expenditure that was outside the budget, we did it. It wasn't that very difficult to do. So I personally don't want to see it in the budget. I think we have the avenue of putting it back in if we need to. And I'd rather see the money either in the working cash fund or the general fund. Doesn't matter to me where it goes. But to put it quite frankly, I'd rather see it in the bank versus obligating ourselves not to just an employee that's $150,000 plus pension, but you're talking about a permanent position that will literally cost millions just within the next 10 years. And great, that new city manager comes in and he tells us we need this. I'll be the first person to say, that's great, show me why. But I'm just not prepared to slot it in the budget. I'd rather put the money in the bank. Thank you.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under different circumstances, if the timeline were different, I would be inclined to agree with Alderman Rose and Wagner and certainly Alderman Levin, stating that the full year is in the budget, and we know darn well the full year is not going to be used. But really what it comes down to for me are 2 points. Practically, can we get this person hired and in if we all agree, or we agree as a group with staff that it needs to be, and then get the person in place before the budget year ends? I don't believe that we could or that we would. And if I believe that to be the case, then to budget it when I don't think practically we can make it happen, that to me is counterintuitive. So I am not opposed to the position. I am opposed to putting it into a budget in a budget year where I don't think it can literally happen. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it can. And if I am wrong, the money is not changing. The money is going to be there. Now, if it's in the budget and we don't use it, then it drops to the working capital fund or the working cash fund. Likewise, if it's not in the budget and we decide to hire the assistant city manager, we're going to take it out of that same fund. So whether it's, it's half of one, 6 dozen the other, whether it's in or whether it's out, the money's going to be there one way or the other. So just for practical purposes, I don't think we should budget something that won't happen in the budget year. I don't believe it'll happen in the budget year. Therefore, I will move to remove the assistant city manager position from the 2011-2012 budget.
Alderman Morley, second? Or you have a question?
I would ask the motioner to maybe clarify or add to where it should go. And then I'd be happy to second it. I assume it's going to go in one of two funds.
I will amend the motion to be remove the assistant city manager position from the 2011-2012 and have the money reallocated to the general fund working cash.
General fund?
General fund. General fund.
Okay. Alderman Morley, second? Okay. Discussion? Only, I would like to, I'm not going to give an opinion either way, but just keep in mind that no matter which way we go with this, we've got 2 bites at the apple. If we keep it in the budget, we're not approving tonight, we're approving later on. We've got a second bite at the apple. If we take it out, then, and we decide after we hire somebody, we can put it back in. So the challenge is, as some of the other aldermen mentioned, it's tougher to put it back in than it is to take it out. But that's just all a matter of perception. And Alderman Levin.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think you've hit the nail on the head for me. As I said, I could support keeping it in, but I'm not sure I can support an assistant city manager. So to me, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So if the will of the council appears to be that it's not going to be there and we're going to look at it, and if the need arises, I just don't think it can be addressed, the decision of whether or not to hire an assistant city manager, because we don't have the new city manager. We don't know who the council is going to be. So it is a decision for the future, and I'm very respectful of Alderman Healy's comment that maybe we couldn't get it done this year anyway. That's why I ask, is it fully funded for the whole year? Because I don't think there's any expectation that even if we hired a city manager, it would be used. So I think it's one of those where by the end of this, when the vote's called, I might well go the other way. Again, it's not a decision that has to go on whether or not I would support a city manager or not. Assistant city manager, sorry.
Oh, okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Hearing no more discussion, ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Healy.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Nay.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Heza.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Rose.
No.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin. Absent. York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Okay, looks like 11 ayes, 2 nays, 1 absent.
11 ayes, 2 nays, and 1 absent. That motion passes. And to the next circle back, which is, before I go to the next circle back, just to keep everybody clear, we are in a position where we've had a city manager for over 20 years, and the city manager, at sometimes had an assistant, sometimes he hasn't. But one thing I can tell you about City Manager Borchard, it's like playing a game of handball with a guy that makes me run from one side of the room to the other, and he's basically standing in the middle just hitting the ball. Now, I hope our next city manager is the same type of a guy. But, and he may very well be that individual that can play handball like that. But in case he's not, those are, I think, the safeguards why we had originally put this in the budget, and possibly may have to bring it back depending on that individual. And I think we're all willing to take a look at that if that situation arises. So
I would just opine that I think it's wise in the motion that the dollars aren't spent, but the dollars are directed to the general fund as a fund balance contribution. If you need to, you can back it out. So you've got an option to make. But and I think the discussion needed to be had, and the recommendation there to provide for the opportunity going forward, and you're preserving that notion with the dollars going into the fund balance for next year. So
very good, very good. Okay. Next on the circle back, City Manager Borchard.
Was page 117, contractors instead of some full-time employees in the IT area. we've done some review of the consultant's report. I apologize that consultant report hasn't been distributed, it hasn't been put in final form, but would summarize that the consultant's position is that the work needs to be done in IT. I think it's always an option, an alternative. If not full-time, it could be contracted for, as staff has reevaluated, restudied, reanalyzed contract in this context versus full-time. The thought is it's more economically done with permanent full-time employees than with contract. So our staff position would be that the budget as presented is the best option alternative for the highest probability of success of the budget working going forward. If done with contractors, would probably be more expensive.
Alderman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize to the council. I had to step out of the meeting at the very beginning, and I might have missed some housekeeping issues, so I just want to clarify it now as we get a little bit later. I know that dates were discussed. In addition, there's we got a bunch of information today up on the council, up on the dais when we walked in, and I just want to get a better understanding of maybe from either Marilyn or Tom what this is. I know I don't think it's applying to the same consultants or contractors we're talking about right now. Can you clarify what this is? Because obviously, you know, it's about 15 pages and haven't had a chance to look at it yet, and I want to make sure I'm not missing something when we go on to these issues.
I think maybe Alderman Morley is referring to an answer to a different question than to circle back on the IT question.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not missing it.
So the IT was basically going from contractors that were currently using the internal.
Yeah, actually, there's dark positions in the 10-11 budget. We've got IT positions that have been budgeted but haven't been filled. They're budgeted again, proposed to be budgeted in the 11-12 budget. That is what I think was circled and questioned. If the proposed budget plan for gearing up, ratcheting up, reestablishing an IT department would be best done with full-time employees as proposed or contract employees, and Alderman Bram could better identify his question. If that's his question, we've reviewed it again from a staff perspective, and we would recommend that we do it, the council would authorize it through a filling staffing position.
Alderman Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, the consultant was a suggestion. My question really lied upon, from the discussion last week or 2 weeks ago, it seemed to me that some of the IT work, not all of the IT work, were short-term projects compared to longer duration, as this is a permanent need for years and years to come. Part of it was due to the study that was mentioned that we weren't able to receive as of yet from Northeastern? Northern, thank you. So those projects seem to be of short duration, and therefore I thought a consultant would be perfect to assist with those short duration projects. But the second piece of that is, do we need to fill both IT positions in either case within this budget cycle? What is open currently is 2 positions, 2 full-time, and is that an immediate need, or should it be considered to be 1 full-time or 1 consultant or 2 consultants, whatever the mix?
I would ask Assistant Manager, Fire Chief, and IT Coordinator.
Thank you. Yeah, what we have right now is 2 full-time positions vacant, 1 part-time and 1 intern that are vacant right now. They're all budgeted last year. Trying to fill the part-time PC technician and the intern at this time right now. Here the situation becomes with the project manager, the operations manager. We do have the final draft of the report, but we don't have the final report yet. But what they're talking about really is to allow the IT manager to work as an IT manager. Right now, he's working as a second technician, and he's really not getting to the important strategic overview things because there's just not time to do it. Right now, it's keep the computers running, keep the servers going, and just he's out there doing hands-on stuff on a daily basis. And so that's what the report's really talking about. You have to make that investment in IT if you want to get the return out of IT. There's got to be investment in IT. As far as contractors, we do that all the time right now. We just had our voicemail server redone. We didn't do that. We hired outside people to do it. One, we didn't have the time to do it, and two, they're the experts in doing that kind of stuff, so we hired them to do that. As far as work on our ERP, that's all done by contract service also. You know, they come in, they'll do the HTE type of stuff like that. So we use contractors on the small, come in and hit it real quick and get it done with. But for these positions that they're talking about in here, it's more the strategic look at the IT and how we move forward with IT and how we use technology.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, these IT positions, they come up in pretty much every department because we spread them across all departments. We had a discussion in Public Works tonight about city administration and the garbage rates, and IT came up again. They were budgeted last year, they're budgeted again this year. When do we think we'll fill those positions? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, there are 2 full-time budgeted positions for the full year that are spread across this budget. That full year starts in a little over a month. When will they be on board? When is our hiring timeline? Because unlike the assistant city manager discussion where, you know, I'm not sure we should hire, you know, we're going to hire them in the next year. I'm very certain we should hire at least one of these people yesterday. So what is the timeline?
The timeline would be that as soon as possible after the council provides its thumbs-up direction on the positions in the budget, steps will be made to make ready to advertise for the positions. We had earlier, from a staff perspective, with the positions dark, felt it appropriate to wait to receive the northern study and see what the northern Illinois University study would recommend relative to IT. Chief Kopp has identified that IT study is just about ready to be finalized and then provided to all, but the draft of it clearly shows that there's a number of strategic notions that they've identified that would allow Elmhurst to be doing a better job with IT that start with financing the vacant positions to allow the strategic work to be done, the coordination, the collaboration to be done at a more accelerated basis. So with this budget being approved, HR would be authorized to begin the process of preparing the job descriptions and the job search to begin receiving applicants with the goal of filling the positions as quick in the fiscal year as possible. What Chief Kopp mentioned relative to a short report on the project, the long-awaited for actual ability at the police front desk to stack phone calls in an extreme situation has been put in place. I think it's been tested now a couple of times, and the test works. So we'll see. We haven't had to use it in a real emergency, but we believe we're able to now stack calls coming into the front desk of the police station in an after-hours emergency. One of the small projects that IT assists in. So yeah, we would recommend that the positions stay as proposed in the budget. That's part of the IT implementation and upgrading going forward. Operationally, you'll be seeing the Northern's report, I think, in 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks.
Alderman York.
I think maybe, I don't know if Alderman Healy's question was answered, I heard 2 things. I heard we're going to fund 1 full-time position and then a part-time and an intern, or are they 2 full-time positions?
In the budget, there's 2 full-time positions that are dark right now.
Right.
A part-time PC specialist and a part-time intern.
Okay. And what's proposed in the budget to fill
Those
the
are
2?
yeah, to fill all of those.
4.
Actually, the part-time PC specialist right now and the intern, we're interviewing for those right now. because we don't, I mean, because we lost our one part-time PC tech, he's gone, so we have basically Mike and Victor, and they're running around like, very busy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I'm always asking staff about IT projects that need to be done. So I see a real need for some additional help in this area. My question, I think, kind of revolves perhaps along the same lines as Alderman Healy's, but I think it's critical that we do this in the right order. I think we need to, and I've seen really a first draft of the report quite some time ago, and understand that they're going to identify needs, but I'm wondering if this decision isn't best made after we look at the report and kind of figure out what they're identifying. And I think this also ties back in then to one of the positions. I think I'm in favor of hiring one position now because we are having very talented people do very rudimentary tasks, and I think that's inefficient. So I could be for one. As far as the second and the third and the fourth, I think I'd be an advocate of let's get the report, let's see what the report says, and I think it hinges a little bit on the overall resource evaluation by the new city manager as well. I think that's a part of it as well as to seeing what we think we need to do. And then I love the idea of contracting out these services wherever we can because a lot of times there's a huge human capital put in at the beginning and not so much required to kind of carry it down the road, although I know we have a backlog of projects. So I'm in favor of one position now and perhaps holding on the other three until we get the report and do the evaluation that we need to do in the longer term, not necessarily 2 years from now, but in the next 3 to 6 months. Thank you.
I'm hoping that report will be in before the new budget year even starts. Hopefully we can get it to the committee as soon as possible. I think, from what I've seen in the final draft, that it's some really good stuff in there.
When do we expect that report again?
It should be within like the next week. I mean, I got a call into the guy today, and I can receive a call back.
Okay, very good. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Alderman York from the standpoint of it's hard to discuss this when we don't have the report or most of the council hasn't seen the report on what direction to go. I am taking the same stance from our previous discussion, and that is I do think that one IT position is probably necessary. I'm pretty confident is necessary to approve now, one full-time position. I think we're talking cheap labor. You know, hopefully that's the summer intern. They fill that role by beefing up their resume over the summer and therefore not working as expensively as a full-timer. So those rudimentary tasks that have been referenced should be delegated, at least through the summer months, you know, to the intern or the part-time individual. We talked about it before when we talked about the assistant city manager position. We not only have to look at the salary aspect of this, we also need to look at the benefits and all the long-term implications. The two positions have been dark for, I believe, over a year. I think that one is necessary because there is a backlog of projects from what I've been told, speaking to the current IT manager. So I would like to make a motion to remove one of the IT positions from the 11-12 budget.
City Manager Borchert.
Well, not to interrupt a potential seconder, but I would wish to suggest that a bit different situation, and that the assistant city manager certainly is a new position, not in the 10-11 budget, proposed in the budget. We've reviewed that. You've made a motion, second approved it, that we'll take it out of the budget and add those dollars to the contribution of general fund balance. Contrary is what's before us relative to IT. The four positions, the two full-time, the one part-time, and the intern are all currently in the 10-11 budget. The intern spot was filled, the part-time spot was filled. They've gone dark. The two full-time spots were earlier filled. They've gone dark, but because of the budget crunch, currently all four are dark. All four are provided for in the 11-12 budget. I would submit that it would be a staff position, again, that they ought to be left in the budget, understanding...
Point of order. Sorry, Mr. Manager. We actually have a motion on the floor, and it either needs to be seconded or not seconded, and certainly City Manager Borchert can continue with exactly what he's saying, but let's get either the motion on the floor or get it ignored. So we have a pending motion. I'd like to
We
see.
did not have a second, and that's why...
I understand that, but
Right.
I didn't know if you had called it and said the motion fails for lack of second.
No,
but-
no, no. I didn't. So, would you like to second the motion, Alderman?
Sure.
Okay, we have a second.
Just to allow Alderman well,
City-
you never know. Maybe future Alderman Borchert.
We have a second by Alderman Morley. City Manager Borchert.
I was
go ahead
almost
and
finished. I
continue.
understand that.
Thank you.
The point of order is correct, but
Yeah.
That in light of this report, which we have been, from a staff perspective, disappointed on relative to the timeliness of it, but it's I think of quality. I think they're a quality organization, and I think their recommendations will be quality. We're saddened that it's taken so long to get it. I would suggest that the budget stay as is going forward, and that you would ask staff to not fill any of those positions until this northern report is received and reviewed at the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee could offer its recommendations to the City Council relative to the implementations of that report, which I'm thinking would be allowed if the budget would be approved. Most of what the northern report is suggesting would be able to be done, in that it's going to be provided for in the budget, but the specific implementation of it would be then guided by the Finance Committee and the City Council with direct knowledge.
Alderman Mulliner?
Yeah, this is an area near and dear to me. I've read the preliminary report from Northern. I strongly believe that I will call them 3 positions, because it's not really 4 full positions. It's 2 positions and 2 part-time positions should stay in the budget. I don't think we should remove those at all. It's long overdue. I think we should continue to move forward with trying to fill at least the PC technician positions and the interns. The other positions, I believe that as the report is returned to us, we'll see some changes in maybe what they're recommending as far as job descriptions and responsibilities. But I think that we need to keep these positions in place. We are falling further and further behind. We have an extremely talented person running the IT department, but he does not have the time to do what he's talented and what he's able to do. And he's falling behind because of the fact what he's doing is fixing computers and fixing problems that are out there. And if we don't have these positions in the budget, we're going to continue to fall further behind. More technology is coming into the city, not less. Technology is falling into the police department, the fire department, public works, every area. We see it across every one of the budget areas. So it's very critical that we get these positions into the budget and we get these positions filled as soon as possible. I, too, am disappointed in the length of time it's taken to get this report, but you know, we do need to have these positions available so that we can get this moving forward and do some stuff that's positive.
Alderman York.
I pretty much agree with Alderman Mulliner. I don't think I would support the motion as it was made. I think it's important that we leave the positions in the budget, evaluate what, if anything, is needed when the report's made, and then we can take action on exactly who we hire and how many we hire as we are kind of made aware of the circumstances around that. Thank you.
Alderman Gutenkopf?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I have 2 thoughts. My first thought is that since this isn't a position requiring City Council approval, that my opinion is our role would be to identify a total amount of spending for this department, and then it's up to the city manager and the department head to decide how those funds need to be allocated. So I appreciate the sentiment. I would approach it in a different way. I might say that overall, I think perhaps there's a cap amount that we want to allocate for the particular service, and sort of kind of leave it at that. My second thought is that I appreciate the budget book summarizes each department and gives a list of accomplishments. The IT accomplishments sound pretty impressive to me, but I'm mindful that staff are telling me that the IT people are very behind, and struggling to keep up. It would be helpful for me to hear from you some summary of what it is they have not been able to accomplish, where they're falling short, something codified. You know, we still have 15 billion work orders we can't get to, that sort of thing. Because it sounds like 210 work orders a month is huge, and for short-staffed, what are they not able to do?
Where should we start?
See, Major Borchard,
Well, there's software applications in the building department, the fire department, and police department that that the operational folks are aware of as they see what technology can be provided to their department as they look at the latest, not bleeding edge, but leading edge technology software. We're not able to release IT to even begin working on that because of the existing systems providing just the existing operations are struggling. It really took contracting out with the phone system to get that rather simple. From my perspective, you hear it all the time. Every place I call, I talk to a machine that says all lines are busy, hold, the next available person that's live will get to you. It took a long time to get that system added to the existing front desk program of the police station because of the old hardware that the Elmhurst phone system has, because we can't get to the strategic study of what's the best way to identify upgrading that hardware and software in a cost-effective fashion. There's application after application. The GIS, the dream of operators taking phone calls from citizens asking about a situation at an address to be able to key into the operating hardware and software to identify that 215 Main Street had a series of this work done back in 2010, and the water was repaired in 2009. All of that on a workable screen available to the telephone operator, serving not only the citizens asking questions, but city staff looking for history at a location. Financial applications, how long it took before we were able to begin to accept credit cards. That's now implemented, but frankly, we weren't pleased with the timing that it required to get to that because of the IT. Document imaging is a project that's been talked about in budgets, but not been able to be implemented. Others?
And can I have a follow-up? Are
Yes.
these are the kinds of things that the study is looking at to help us implement. Some of these sound like they're long-term, some of them might be easily implemented this year if we had the right staffing. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, yes, certainly with staffing, there'd be more productivity, and the implementation would begin. I know the dream would be that a responding police car, fire car, certainly fire cars would have access to the GIS system and to the record system of what the building department has inventoried as to locations of hazardous materials, the actual construction plans for the building, so the firefighting supervisors at a scene would have much faster records available to them in response of an emergency call. Some of that's available now, but not nearly as quickly as it could be.
Anybody else? Alderman Healy and Alderman
Mr.
Brown.
Mayor, 2 points. I think we need to hire one position now, to be real honest, between what I've heard staff, just get through saying what staff has been telling us for a while. Alderman Mulliner, I know, has experience in this IT, and, when he says we're way behind, I believe him. Alderman York, I know, is very involved. My own business, we are hiring IT people left and right. Let's face it, the world is heading and has been heading down that way for a while. We've got 2 people on staff, an organization our size. That tells me we're understaffed. So I would encourage staff to start the process now to hire at least 1 full-time. A, it's budgeted for this year. B, I think it'll be approved for next year. Because do any of us really think this Northern study is going to tell us that we don't need more? It's going to tell us we need more. It's a question of how much. Second point, in relation, a direct comment on Alderman Bram's comment. I think I understand where Alderman Bram's going. You know, and I generally am in favor of contractors when we can. Let's face it, we're not paying pensions on contractors. So if the motion is just to cut one from the budget, I'm definitely opposed to it. However, if the motion were to remove a full-time employee to put a equal amount of contractor work in its place, now I think we have a discussion. At least I'm open to discussing that. But that's not the motion, and even that motion where it was a quid pro quo, if you will, that I'd want staff input, I'd probably want committee input on that before I even considered it. But that's the only way I would consider that kind of motion. I will not consider a motion at all to remove IT personnel. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Alderman Levin.
Well, I felt I could go either way on the assistant city manager, but I don't feel that way on this particular item. The finance task force spent a lot of time talking not to the IT department, but to others as well. And what was interesting was that each department head said we need more IT support, and that was the one resource, even if it came to cutting their own department, where they said we have to beef this up. And I know you've tried to explain what the tasks were, but I recall there were more projects that were being pushed back that couldn't be done. I also think that it's an easy fix to say we're going to hire someone on contract, and some tasks are well suited for contract, but I would not want to substitute our opinion for where employees are on board who are familiar with the systems on an ongoing basis and know how to fix them and know how to change them, as opposed to you want some sort of application run for some proprietary software. So on this one, I absolutely am not going to support the motion, and I think we need to leave the positions as proposed in the budget, and if the study shows something different, then I would be prepared to look at it, but opposed to the budget, to the motion.
Very good. Anybody else? Alderman Wagner.
I had a couple points here. Let's try to think logically here. We're trying to invest into an IT organization with hiring people, and that seems to be an oxymoron to me. Typically, technology is invented to actually lessen the amount of costs anybody is incurring. So that's just as a point. And as the assistant city manager position, I'm for leaving this in as a budgetary item. But I do want to ask Director Gast, the amount of the 470, it's line item 10-01, page 117. The 472, how much of that is from the staff, the people that are now coming, positions being filled, or, yeah, positions being filled? The permanent positions, I believe they're called.
Okay. I've consulted with the person who puts the personnel budget together, and he says about 150,000 on that line is for the 2 new full-time positions.
Okay, and those are pensionable employees?
Yes. Yes. They would be IMRF pension employees. Yes.
And Mr. Mayor, sure. One follow-up. I do find this a little odd that we had, although it was an internship from Northern Illinois, and it was great, and I'm sure the preliminary report is going to be interesting to read, but we're talking about a budget that we're basing off of a report that nobody's seen. I find that a little interesting. But if we could get some bullet points, maybe Assistant City Manager this week, before we vote on the budget, that kind of highlights some of the high-level findings would be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely. Alderman Brown, and I apologize because I thought you had already spoken, so I was trying to get everybody the ability to say
It's okay.
something, so.
Thank you,
Alderman Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Alderman Gutenkopf's recommendation was actually a good one. Making the statement or making the motion of removing one full-time position might not be the right path to go down. In regards to the report, I agree. I think that's why this budget discussion, or at least this line item of the budget discussion, is very difficult to do. We're getting a study eventually, if it's this week, next week, or 2 months down the line that we haven't seen. No matter what the study says, I agree with Alderman Healy's comments. I think it's going to recommend that we need some improvement in the IT area. By leaving one of these positions in the budget, that's a 50% increase in the IT department, essentially. So it goes from 2 to 3 full-time employees compared to what's currently planned, 2 to 4, not including the intern, not including the part-timers. Whatever the study does come out and say, it doesn't mean that we have to implement it today. We have had these 2 positions dark for at least a year. I'm just trying to take a slow road here, and that is where my motion is going of, I agree, IT needs to be staffed up. I think 1 position in the budget immediately is something that we should strive for. Do we need 2? Do we need 6? Well, we'll see once the study comes out and the committee reviews it as well as the city council. I would like to actually make an amendment to my motion to amend it from the standpoint of to reduce, how am I going to phrase this? Reduce this line item 1001 by, well, since we were given the dollar amount, $150,000 for 2 full-time positions by $70,000. No second.
So to clarify, you're looking at line item on page 105, Alderman?
117.
I'm sorry, 117.
117?
Line item 1001. Essentially reducing it by approximately, a little bit less, but approximately 1 full-time salary, which was 70,000.
Okay. So amended motion?
I don't support the amendment.
Okay, very good. Motion fails for lack of a second. Unless there's, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, his motion to amend fails. Our motion is still
Okay.
in order.
Yeah, we go back to the actual.
And just to clarify, I seconded the motion, quite frankly, to keep the whole meeting in order, not necessarily to support
right.
The issue. And I don't think that the motion itself actually addresses a very good point that one of the other aldermen brought up about the timing. So I don't believe there's any more, I don't have any more conversation to add to this specific motion, of which I seconded, so I'd like to call the question on this specific motion.
Okay. And we got a second to call the question by Alderman York. And Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to call the roll, please.
Well, don't I
Voice
need a
vote on
voice?
Excuse me, this will be the call, a voice vote on the call to question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay, the call to question passes. And now we go back to the actual motion by Alderman Bram. And Clerk Spencer, if you can call the roll on that motion, please.
Bram?
Aye.
Morley?
No.
Kennedy?
No.
Mulliner?
No.
Wagner?
No.
Gutenkopf?
No.
Pezza?
No.
Shea?
No.
Leader?
No.
Rose?
No.
Hipskin? Absent. York?
No.
Levin?
No.
Healy?
No.
Okay, that's
One aye,
1 aye,
nays.
12 nays, and 1 absent.
1 aye, 12 nays, and 1 absent. The motion fails. And I'm sorry, I should have done a voice vote. I apologize. Okay, we go back to back to the circle backs here, so we're good to go on IT. And
We'll get that report to the council as quickly as possible and certainly begin the review with Finance Committee, but the numbers will hold in the budget as presented.
Okay. Alderman Pezza?
I'm just curious, even if we don't have the full report, if we have the draft, can you perhaps, from that draft, pull out what's pertinent?
Chief
This way,
Kopp
by
says he'll
next
do
week,
that.
hopefully, we'll be able to be more informed. Thanks.
Before we go on to the next, is everybody okay as far as we're at almost running about 10:30? Do you want to keep on going? Do we want to? No, okay. Alderman Rose?
Well, I would like to say we should not, we have a huge issue here that is the last issue. We have now spent, we've gone through 1, 2, we have
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more issues to go. The last one, I think, which is a significant issue on the Historical Museum, I think does a disservice. At that point, Alderman Healy has brought up a pretty complicated issue, and I think it deserves a lot of thought. And I'll tell you, we might get to that by 11:30,
Right.
perhaps. So I would suggest we,
Your suggestion is to move it forward, or should we table till next meeting?
I think we should table it till the next meeting.
Table
is
till
what
next
I
meeting.
think. I think we should
Okay.
move, I think that's.
Right. Okay.
Perhaps it's just me, but.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might suggest that that issue may not be as complicated as you or others may think. I've had many discussions with staff, with other aldermen, I'm changing my thinking. I don't think it'll be as long as you may think.
Point of order.
Alderman Rose.
I personally didn't think the last point we talked about was going to take place. So I'm not a great estimator, is all I'm saying, and that I would say that it may be much more, maybe it's not complicated,
trust me
but
on this one.
lengthy.
Trust me on this one.
My mama says she loves me, but she could be jiving too.
Thank you, Mr.
I don't
Chair.
know, I'll trust her or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is what I was trying to clarify before our last discussion. Like I said, I unfortunately had to step out the first 3 minutes of the meeting in terms of timing, because I actually am not finished with the IT conversation, because I don't think we've addressed Alderman York's question about timing of hiring of additional folks. So I do want to clarify, because we are getting to that bewitching hour, and I do think that none of us can predict, otherwise we all would have won this Powerball lottery. But none of us can predict how long these individual items are going to be. So I'd like to go back, at least for a minute, to the calendar. Okay, so it's the 28th. I personally don't believe, unless we stayed here till past midnight, that we would get to a point where you would be able to wrap up a budget with City Attorney Storino and get us to vote on it next week. So I would, and on top of that, I got to tell you, after about 10:30, I don't know about the quality of input you're going to get. So I'd throw it out to city staff and say, hey, what's next if we want to continue these? Plus, we also have the bulk of information. We do have to the 31st. Lay it out for us if we wrap it up now or in the next 10 minutes, what the next 3 weeks look like.
I think it could be done on Monday nights that are remaining. We got next Monday's a council meeting Monday. We could work till 10:30 that night, maybe get the agenda done, and then go into a committee of the whole on the budget, picking up where we've left off. If we don't finish that night, there's still the following Monday, which would be a committee meeting night, split committee, and at that point, frankly, we'll be in that lame duck status with the council. The election will have been had. The Monday following will be a committee meeting. We could do committee of the whole, we could limit it just to committee of the whole on the budget, to finish the budget, to allow the material to be finished, so that the city council would have a good understanding of that for the following Monday, which is the third Monday, and the Elmhurst Municipal Code says that after the election, no special council meetings can be held other than to inaugurate the new council. So between now and the election, you could have special meetings on the budget, but after the election, we're limited relative to budget consideration. The regular second meeting of a month on that third Monday, so. But you've got 2 Mondays. I think we should be able to finish, you should be able to finish in 2 Mondays. Absent that, you could call a special meeting between now and the election. I would recommend you do Mondays.
Right.
So, just to make sure I understand, we could come back on the 4th. My opinion, I think we have a pretty good shot at wrapping all of this up, including the additional information we got. And then, would it be the 11th or the 18th where we would vote on the wrapped-up budget?
And that would be the 18th.
And that wouldn't violate any of our... Okay.
We vote on the report and the ordinance on the same day, correct?
Well, I think on the 4th, you would authorize the staff to put it in the final form that we've talked about. We'd have the numbers, we just got to print it, hand it over to Attorney Storino. Storino prepares the resolution then for the budget to be approved on the council meeting.
Very good. Okay. 11, question?
I would be willing to entertain, because I take Alderman Healy at his word that it's not that complicated, and we have all the people who have been sitting here all night. I don't think it's going to be that complicated, and I think I'd be willing to move that up in the agenda, but I'd leave it to the chair and see if we can march through it, and if we don't, doesn't look like it's going anywhere, then...
I'd be happy to move it up in the agenda so we don't have to keep these fine people waiting. And hopefully we can move this pretty quickly. If,
I would be opposed to that. I have no guarantee that it's going to go very quickly. I mean,
Right.
I just don't. I had no guarantee on the last one, which was relatively simple, that it was going to go very quickly, and it did not. So if the rest of the council wants to, that's fine, but I would be opposed to it. We should have everyone here next Monday night as well. I don't know why we wouldn't.
Right. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Well, and to be fair, the museum provided a lot of material for us that we just got tonight on the dais. And if it's going to be pertinent to the discussion, I really would like time to look at it.
Okay. Alderman Pezza?
I'm not sure if it's out of line to ask if what they would prefer it as.
I can ask. Would you prefer to come back, or would you rather us go in a little droggy-eyed and maybe not as equipped and prepared as we should be? Your call. Would you rather wait one more meeting, or would you rather? Okay. I know it's our call. I know exactly.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. Alderman Healy.
Thank you. And I understand Alderman Rose's point, Alderman Gutenkopf, lots of information, and I appreciate Alderman Levin's trust. Indulge me for 10 minutes. And if after 10 minutes the council thinks it's going to go longer, we can go longer. Indulge me for 10 minutes. And Alderman Levin beat me to the punch, because there are 5 people that have sat here all night that are very vested in this. Hear me out for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It won't even take that long. If there's additional conversation, we can cut it off and start again, but
Put him on the clock.
fair enough.
Alderman, you got 3 minutes.
Fair enough. Okay.
And if I don't like what I hear, we're going to continue till the next meeting.
Alderman Shays already said she's going to kick me, so under threat of physical violence. I have had many discussions, and as I said at the last meeting, I changed my tactics even from a year ago, and I'm reconsidering my position. I'm changing my tactics even from a week ago. However, I don't want to imply that what I believe is softened at all, because what I believe has not softened at all. I do not believe, whether it's the city of Elmhurst or any city, should be in the museum business. I firmly believe that. I also believe that we are in the museum business, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to support the Historical Museum like we would any other department. I believe that support should not exceed $700,000. That's what I believe. However, many discussions with people in the community, people on the dais, staff, that what I discussed and proposed, or said I was going to propose this week, is really not pertinent to a budget conversation. That is more of a council action specific to the museum, and it's maybe not best discussed during the budget, and maybe it's best discussed by a committee first. So once we pass the budget, I will be making a referral to the committee, to the appropriate committee, not even sure which one that is, but we'll figure it out, that we look at how we treat the Historical Museum and develop what I'd call a long-term action plan for the museum, up to and including privatization. And I don't mean privatization to just, any company that bids on it, but privatization to where the foundation becomes more important, and up to and including running the building. Just a thought, that'll be part of my referral. So that'll happen after the budget. Now for this year's budget. Expenditures, net of grants, are $714,000 approximately. Today we found out that, and City Manager Borchert, I'm going to ask you for a little information, a little detail, that perhaps one of the museum's expenses were over budgeted because of a new contract for artifact storage in the amount of $6,000?
That is correct. The budget for the leased facilities for the storage was budgeted, and the negotiated contract provided a more favorable rate. I think the savings might be $5,000 to $6,000.
Okay, so that further reduces that $714,000 city expense by $5,000 to $6,000. Getting real, and that's a budgeted number that's getting very close to my personal $7,000 number. Am I willing to have a discussion over that remaining $7,000, $8,000? No, I'm not. Because I understand that that's a budgeted number. Sometimes you come in under budgeted numbers. So I'm going to have faith and confidence that Director Berghager and his staff will come in hopefully under that. If they don't, they don't. But I am not going to make any motion. I am not going to make any recommendations. As far as I'm concerned, the circle back is covered. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Alderman Rose.
Point of order, I just believe it is so unfair that we cannot respond to that we have tied our hands to say we're not going to be able to respond to that, because I'm so opposed to the idea of the museum being privatized and not under public auspices, and the fact that now we can't debate that. To me, that is, it's an unfair position, which is why I really did not want us to talk about this until we can talk about it as a whole together, because I think we cannot respond to that. We've already tied our hands to not respond to that.
I understand. Alderman Mulliner.
I personally don't think we have had our hands tied. Alderman Healy may have said that we can't, that he's done with his issue, but I think we can still respond to it next week. I still believe that we should leave this an open item, and I think we should have an opportunity to respond to it. I don't think that it should be just closed. Just my personal feeling.
Absolutely. Okay. Anything else? Alderman Leader.
We just vote on the fact, the budget aspects of it. As I understood it, Alderman Healy doesn't want to change the allocation in any way. Can we separate the two issues?
Yes. Right. We're going to leave this as is.
Oh, okay.
And if he makes a referral later to committee, then that referral will go through accordingly.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Alderman Morley.
Thank you. Back to this IT report we keep talking about. I don't want to extend our meeting. My question is, can I at least get, I think someone else asked for it, can I at least get a draft of that report between now and our next meeting?
Yes.
We should be able to get that.
Great. Can't wait to talk about IT at the next meeting.
Okay. Yes, we will. And having I think kind of extended our powers here, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn till the next Monday. Alderman Morley with a motion. Alderman York with a second. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? We're adjourned.
Chris, you sort of 2 minutes.